We're going to go ahead and kick off our interview with Steve Downs. And if you have a question for him, please raise your hand so I can make sure I know which. And we're going to start with you.
So, given the fact that you've been playing the Master Chief for almost over 20 years at this point, with the latest entry in the series, Halo Infinite, it's been noted by several people that the Master Chief has a more mature, wizened aspect of it. Was that a creative decision that you had at the beginning of production?
Yeah, so mature and wise. Of course, it's another way for saying he's a lot older, which he is. But yes, to answer your question, I think that was a conscious decision on my part, and I think also with my director, Paul Crocker, we talked about that, and I think with the introduction of the weapon, I think it
was going out.
Okay, good. Okay. With the introduction of the weapon and the dynamic between the chief and his AI. Is a little different than it was with Cortana. So because of that, it became more of a, I guess, fatherly sort of relationship, in a way. And so yes, I think to accomplish that, I sort of approached it in that way, sort of a little wiser, a little, been through a few things and would maybe try to impart some of that wisdom onto his new AI.
Thank you.
Next question.
Oh, great. Hey, my name's Alan.
Hey,
nice to meet you. So, when you first voiced Master Chief, did you expect Halo to become like the face of Xbox?
Well, no, is the short answer. The long answer is that not only did I not expect it, nobody at Bungie expected it, to the point where there was no plan to do a sequel. In fact, some of the head guys at Bungie were dead set against doing sequels. They just didn't believe in them. They thought they were really one and done kind of guys. Well, Microsoft had another idea with the success of Combat Evolved, so they went right back and started working on Halo 2. But I had no idea, and to be honest with you, they'd completely forgotten about it. We did the session. It took Combat Evolved took, I think, maybe 2 or 3 sessions for me. And then we, as a voice actor, you move on, you go to the next thing. And because I wasn't involved in the gaming community, I'm not a gamer myself, I was unaware of how huge this thing was becoming until really over a year later. And I was at a friend's house, and their kids were playing Halo, and I recognized it. Yeah. I said, I think I voiced a character in that game, and the kids said, who? And I couldn't remember his name. I said, I don't remember his name, but I think he was kind of the main guy in the game. And they said, Master Chief. I said, yeah, it was Master Chief. So 30 minutes later, there's, every kid in the neighborhood is at his front door with either an Xbox or a copy of their game wanting me to sign it. And that was my aha moment that, something was happening here that I had no idea was going on.
Yes, sir.
As far as the live-action Halo series,
yeah.
What is your take on that film?
On the live-action show, on the Paramount show? I really like it. Obviously, it's kind of a different experience for me than it would be for maybe anybody else. I think I was delighted when they decided to include Jen Taylor as Cortana. To me, there was no other. I don't know why it was even a discussion. There was no other option as far as I was concerned. She is Cortana. I think Pablo Schreiber does a great job as Chief. The storyline is obviously different. There is some connection to the original canon, and then there's a lot that has nothing to do with the storyline in the game. But it's a different medium, and so many times when video games try to be converted into a movie or a TV show, they fail. And one of the reasons they fail is because they just basically try to do the game they're two different mediums. So I think they made a wise decision to approach Halo, the television show, as a different entity than Halo, the game. And I look at it like, you know, I'm a big fan of science fiction anyway. I love good science fiction. And us science fiction lovers have a heavy cross to bear because there's a lot of lousy science fiction out there. And so I watched the show with a completely open mind and said, you know, thinking, will I be entertained by this? And I am, and I'm interested, and I can't wait to see what they do in the second season. Yeah.
You say you don't really play games a lot, but do you have a weapon that you like best in Halo?
Do I have a favorite weapon?
Uh-huh.
A plasma rifle. I like, and I have one at home. And I really like it. It doesn't have real plasma. It doesn't shoot real plasma, but I kind of like the style of it, and you know, whenever the chief has a chance to get his hands on one, and the battle rifle, of course, is great. But yeah, I think probably I'm partial to the plasma rifle when I can. Yeah.
Have you ever had a chance to dress up as Master Chief?
Never, and nor will I ever. When I first started to make appearances on behalf of Halo and Master Chief, I remember calling Marty O'Donnell. Marty was the guy who cast me as Master Chief. He wrote all the music for the Bungie games, cast all the voices, was an integral part of the development of Halo. So when somebody asked me, they wanted me to come down to I think it was a GameStop or some iteration of GameStop it was a grand opening, and they wanted me to, you know, make an appearance. And so I called Marty and said, "Are you okay with this? Can I do it?" He says, "Yeah." He says, you know, the only thing we ask is that you don't dress up as the character." And I said, "Not a problem." So no, I don't. I've never put on the Mjolnir, you know, to date, and I don't foresee it happening. Although maybe some Halloween when you come to my door, who knows? Yeah.
So you've spent a number of years as a DJ, radio personality before Halo, and then you transitioned. Was your relationship with your wife or your partner, who's also a voice actor, did that help ease the transition, or did you plant the idea in your head, or was it just you just doing work and it just transformed on its own?
Well, I've done voiceover, you know, well before Halo, but radio was what, you know, was my career of choice from a long time ago. And in some ways, you know, it can be a natural progression to get into voiceover. And early in my radio career, I actually fell in love with the production part of you know, producing commercials or shows or whatever, and I fell in love with that part of it. And you know, as I was building these things, I was the only voice around, so I would voice them. And then I really got into voiceover, and especially my main bread and butter with voiceover was commercial work. A lot of commercial works and narration and that kind of thing. So it was, in some ways, a natural transition. But I kept doing radio. I just retired from full-time radio work 5-6 years ago. But I'll never retire from voiceover as long as I can speak. It's just too much fun. Yeah.
So what would you say is your favorite performance as Chief throughout all the games?
There's two that immediately come to mind. Halo 4 was my favorite experience for a couple of reasons. First of all, there was some question as to whether I would be still voicing Master Chief. When Microsoft took it over from Bungie, they were going to recast both Master Chief and Cortana with different people. Fortunately, and that's why I feel so indebted when I go to these conventions, because it's those people, the people who come up and want your autograph or whatever, they were the ones that saved us. Because when they sort of beta tested Halo 4 without our voices, there was a lot of pushback, and so, you know, we ended up going back in. So, you know, I was grateful for that. But also, I really loved the storyline of Halo 4, and I felt that it really started to dig a little deeper into the relationship between the Chief and Cortana. And then thirdly, it was the first time Jen Taylor and I actually got to work together in the same room at the same time. And that was a real joy. but also Halo Infinite. And Halo Infinite, as I mentioned earlier, I had a great director in Paul Crocker, and he really embraced Master Chief in a way that no other director really had. It really kind of understood him in the way that I understood him. And so we could together, bring to life. And it was really, when I finally got to watch Halo Infinite, it was the first time in all the Halo games I've ever done where I thought, I left my best work on the floor. You either like it or you don't, but I was satisfied with it. And so Halo Infinite and 4 are kind of tied neck and neck, I guess. Yes.
So aside from Halo, what would you say is your proudest voiceover work?
Is my what?
Your proudest, like
Yeah. Well, pretty hard to top Halo. Most of my other work, as I said, has been commercial work. I had a long-running campaign back in the, when was that? Mid-2000s with Carnival Cruise Line that I'm proud of it because it paid really well. And it ran for a very long time. So, I really like that. And I really like to do, and I don't do much of it, hand out there, producers. I like doing documentaries. I like watching them, but I like recording them. It's funny because one of my favorite voiceover people who does documentaries is Liev Schreiber, who is the half-brother of Pablo, which is sort of this, 6 degrees of separation thing. Because I really admire his work as not only as an actor, but also as a voiceover and for narration. And I love, doing that kind of work. I did a series many years ago, back in the early 90s, for the Shark Week that's on Discovery Channel. So I worked with a guy, and they were connected to Cousteau and his production company, and I did a number of narrations for some videos that they put together that would run during Shark Week. So that was kind of cool. That was my claim to fame before Halo. Hey, aren't you the guy on Shark Week? So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
What was the process of finding Master Chief's voice like? Did you just go in and just start recording, or did it take some time to develop?
Yeah. We, when I came in for the first sessions, Marty O'Donnell and I sat down, and there was no visual for me to look at. I didn't even know what Master Chief looked like. But we just talked about the game, actually didn't talk about the game, we talked about the universe. We talked about the Halo universe. This is what Marty understood it to be, and what Master Chief's role in it was. And so I could get sort of a picture of what was going on here, and then who Master Chief was. He was a super soldier, and he didn't say much, but when he did, somebody usually died. And his main direction and where we launched it, from my point of view, was he said, think of Clint Eastwood when Clint Eastwood did what they used to call the spaghetti westerns for a few dollars more and a fistful of dollars, and even Dirty Harry. He said, think of that, because if you remember, in those movies, he never spoke much, hardly at all. But when he did, somebody usually died. So that was my launching point for Halo or for Master Chief, and from that, I sort of grew into, giving him his own voice.
Can you recall anything that stood out to you when the role of Master Chief came to you?
Anything that stood out to me?
Right.
I think it was trying to find the right balance between a character who is very stoic and seems to be devoid of emotion, and yet there's something inside there that he's very emotional about. That part of it sort of comes to light a little bit in the TV show, where you get to, and if you read The Fall of Reach and some of the Halo books, you get to understand his origins. And he was basically kidnapped as a child and had a lot of things done to him that were not necessarily his idea. And so there's an emotional part of him that he has a difficult time expressing. because they kept that part of him down. So you know, that was how you know, every character, when an actor approaches a character, there's always, you try to find the tension in that character to convey that to the audience. And to me, that was the tension of Master Chief, is, you know, a seemingly emotionless person who had a lot of emotion there and just didn't know how to sort of navigate it. So that's kind of how I approached it.
Then we have time for one more question.
All right, you say that Master Chief doesn't say a lot. But do you
Correct.
have a line that you like that he said?
I'm sorry, say again?
You have a favorite line that he said?
You know, people ask me that a lot, and it's hard for me to have a favorite line. I think my favorite line, I suppose, is at the end of Halo 4. There's a scene with him and Lasky on the bridge, and this is at the very end of the game, and we think Cortana is dead at that point, or he does anyway. And Lasky's, for those of you who remember the scene, Lasky's doing all the talking and the Chief is saying nothing. And then he finally, as if to himself, says, well, Lasky says something about being a machine. You know, we're not just machines out here. And the Chief says, she said that to me once, about being a machine. And I just remember doing that line, and it felt emotional, and so that's one of my favorites. But you know, the fans have theirs, and their favorite is "Finish the fight." That's their favorite. So, did you have